Welcome to the 68th Youth Governor Debate. My name is Jessie Zan and I will be moderating this debate. The candidates will each answer 2 predetermined questions. Each candidate will have the opportunity to rebuttal, but can only rebuttal twice during the entire debate. So use them wisely. And with that, let's begin. Julia, we'll start with you. You previously stated as a part of your platform that you'd like to expand the exchange program with Alabama's Y&G. How specifically do you plan on doing this?
So part of my platform was to create an exchange program with other states, and I kind of wanted to begin with Alabama because I think that's a very feasible thing to do. At this conference, I did bring a delegate from Alabama. He's from Birmingham. His name is Lewis Fitzpatrick, if you feel like meeting him. In order to do so, I worked very closely with California core staff, and Lewis worked closely with Alabama core staff until we kind of found an arrangement. So ideally in the future, I'd probably, if I can continue this, if I'm elected governor, I will set up probably an application process to send delegates from California to Alabama and vice versa, working closely with core staff.
Rebuttal. Let's move on to Ted. As part of your platform, one of your goals was to pass bills presented in Youth and Government, Senate, and Assembly to lawmakers who can actually implement them. How do you plan to implement this with other program areas aside from Senate and Assembly?
So I think kind of the Senate and the Assembly almost work as kind of the sink for a lot of what we do in Y&G, because that's also how it works in real government. All of the things like the Department of Finance, the legislative analysts, the lobbyists, a lot of that work goes into the legislative process that goes into the Senate and the Assembly. So I'm trying to make those bills kind of the focus of the program, so that what we do with these bills really can become state laws. So the way I want to use the other programs is as a way of helping that along, taking things like all of the work that the Department of Finance does, instead of letting that go to waste at the end of every Sacramento, using that budget to apply to the Senate and the Assembly the next year, so that the Senate and the Assembly can learn what it's like to actually operate under a real budget like they would do if they were real government, and that way kind of make our bills more realistic and more likely to become state laws. Things like that, using the same thing also like with the Constitution, so that we have our own form of a constitution where we can approve bills in the Supreme Court, so we can integrate the program areas more.
Rebuttal. This question's for Riley. A state judge has declared teacher tenure in California unconstitutional. Do you agree with this decision? Why or why not?
I would have to agree with that. I would have to agree with that decision, mainly because it's putting our students at a major disadvantage. A teacher dictates a lot of the classroom environment, whether it's the amount they learn, how they learn, or what is even allowed to be learned in that classroom. And I think that if we restrict what kind of teachers can be in such a classroom, creating a learning environment, we really restrict the future of the students that we want to become citizens, taxpayers, voters. It's fair to say that we've all had teachers, I think, that could be a lot more effective. And because of tenure laws, we can't do anything about that on a school level, district level, or even county or state. Education should be a better priority, and we should be giving students a greater chance to handle this, and I think striking down tenure would give them that chance.
Julia, did you have anything to add on?
I do. I actually believe that we do need to take steps to reform teacher tenure, and I believe we need to be concrete about it. The Vergara case was a step in the right direction, but unfortunately, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction has decided to appeal the case. I actually ran into him 2 days ago at Ambrosia and didn't get a chance to speak with him about petitions that are circulating asking him not to reform the case. The LAUSD spent $3 million trying to fire teachers, and in the end, we're able to fire very few. It's an expensive process. The schools in the poorest neighborhoods get the worst teachers, and we need to be reforming this with certain steps that need to be taken, such as stronger evaluations or cheaper methods of firing teachers.
Let's move on to Chris. Mass shootings like the one in Newton in 2012 continue to drive the conversation about gun control in America. Do you think there should be nationwide reform? If so, what needs to be done?
I will say right now that I do believe that we need national reform on gun control. I think that as a somewhat general statement to be made about America right now, it is too easy for the average person to get their hands on a pistol, on an assault rifle, and that's a really significant problem. But when we're talking about mass shootings, I also think that it requires more than just gun control, because if a person tries very, very hard, they will be able to get their hands on a gun. It requires more than that. It requires being able to put more funding into our mental health research programs so that we can prevent the attacks before they even happen. We can prevent the desire to perform a mass shooting before it even happens. Or so whether it's that or changing the way that our media views these shootings, not plastering the killer's face up on the news, but rather talking about the victims, talking and not just turning it into this whole huge thing. And so when we're talking about mass shootings, to me it requires more than just gun reform, but gun reform is a significant component and a part of a way of solving it.
I see you all shaking your heads yes, so I assume there's no rebuttal. Throwing it back to Nico. Due to the recent outbreak of measles in the United States, the issue of vaccination has been on the forefront of the nation's attention. Do you believe that mandatory vaccination should be implemented in public schools in order to protect the public?
All right, well, before I answer this question, I'd just like to say that I do deeply respect the right of people to practice their own religion and follow their own customs. But I do think we have to draw a line between public health and the protection of religion, because when one constitutional right starts to infringe on the right of people to be safe, to live happily, to live freely, then I believe that we have to protect the right of people to live, to move forward, to be safe. So I do believe that for the safety of the people, of the children, to create an environment where it's easier to learn and to function as a student, we do have to mandate that there be mandatory vaccinations in schools.
Can I jump on that?
Of course.
So I have to disagree a little bit with Nico, because I completely agree with him that public health is an absolute must, and it really should be one of our priorities. But I think that the right to religious freedom should always be preserved when it doesn't infringe on other people's rights. And I believe that herd immunity is achieved when 75% of a population have immunity. And I believe that, as a matter of fact, most people who don't vaccinate their children don't do it as a religious reason, but rather because they have a lack of education. So I think that what would be a more efficient way of dealing with this issue is, instead of mandating it completely, is to instead increase education and increase better public information about actual health records instead of falsified health records regarding vaccinations.
I can't add on to that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with Ted. Most of the people that oppose vaccinations do so not for religious reasons, but for philosophical reasons, especially relating to the case almost 20 years ago in which a doctor said that vaccinations could cause autism, which was proven false. And so I think it is what you said. It starts not necessarily with mandating it, but rather educating the people that vaccinations are in fact completely harmless and are very safe, and it starts by putting that curriculum maybe into schools, into research facilities, just getting the ideas out there so that people actually want to do it.
We're going to have to move on. This one's for Julia. President Obama recently shared his plan to try and fix the current immigration system, and there is much talk he may use an executive order to deal with the influx of immigrants. Do you believe overriding Congress to deal with this pressing issue is necessary?
I believe that maybe we could have gone through Congress had they not waited over 500 days to pass a common sense bill that made it through the Senate. The House is using this as a political tool, and the president's executive order was absolutely necessary for the lives of millions of immigrants. My father personally came to this country for college, for a college education, for a better life for himself and his children. He's my living, breathing proof that the American dream is alive and well, and I think that we need to make it easier for people to come to this country with that sense of optimism, with that sense of hope. And if the House had maybe been a little bit less partisan with the way that they approached this issue, the president wouldn't have needed executive orders, but at this point in time, it is absolutely necessary.
I'll tack on to that. So, kind of to disagree with Julia, I completely agree with her on her stance on immigration. I believe that everyone should have the right to the amazing opportunities provided in a free country. That said, part of freedom is also understanding that the decisions of the majority ultimately govern what we do. And unfortunately, it is my belief that because the people of the United States elected their congressmen, and those are the congressmen who voted down this bill, regardless of however I may feel on immigration, it's the right of the government to uphold what the majority of people believe. And if that happens to be against immigration reform, unfortunately, I believe that it's not in the president's right to go directly against what the people of the United States want.
Actually, is it possible if I could tack on to respond to that? All right. Well, I do respect the right of the government to make its laws, On the regard of the issue of the majority, I'd just like to comment that the Congress has an approval rating of 9%. Rats are more favorable than the Congress of the United States. Obviously, the United States Congress is not exactly very popular. Obviously, they do not enjoy a majority of support. So I do believe that the president was justified in issuing his executive order, because when he took that oath, he promised to protect and serve the United States, to defend the Constitution, to serve the people who call America home and wish to serve America home because they believe in freedom and opportunity. So I believe he was justified in using his order to further that cause, to enhance the vision of America as a beacon of democracy, to live up to that pledge, to bring in all those huddled masses that are yearning to breathe free.
Let's throw it over to Ted. In light of concerns around cybersecurity, what do you think the government's role in protecting U.S. companies from cyber attacks?
I believe that that before we can really delve into any issues regarding cybersecurity, we first have to really come up with a more clear definition of how things in cyberspace on the internet actually relate to things in the physical world. And whether that relates to freedom of speech or to matters of security, that's kind of where we are right now, is that we still don't have a clear definition of how does the internet and things like it relate to our current laws and our current constitution. And then I think from there, I think the United States government should do no more and no less to protect companies over cyberspace than they do in reality and on the ground of land instead of on the internet.
I'd like to address that.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So living in the heart of Silicon Valley, cybersecurity is a very important issue to me, and I believe there are three main steps the government needs to take. First, I think that they should be working with private companies, where private companies disclose the violations that they've found and share which malware softwares are being used to spread these viruses. Second, this has been proven very effective in Israel. The government should enclose their cybersecurity secrets to private companies to create a more innovative workforce that can use these new technologies. And finally, this isn't just an American issue. The internet is worldwide. We need to form a partnership with as many other large countries as we can, including China and Russia and the Ukraine, to really nail down the issue of cybersecurity on a much larger scale, because we can't do it solely as the state of California or as the country of America.
So Riley, many people disagree with the political party system within youth in government, and it was evident by the massive turnout at Fresno for the unaffiliated party. What advantage do you see with running with a political party?
Well, I can see where people's frustration comes from. Even in the United States, we see people becoming disinterested with the developing political environment. But with the political party, the system in YNG is obviously in heavy disrepair. But it does bring some advantages, particularly to the candidates. An issue that we've seen displayed at this conference, in particular, budgeting. It's very specific, and there's very specific parameters that we have to meet in terms of numbers, dates, deadlines, what we can use it on, what we can't use it on. And the parties have a lot looser parameters when it comes to things like that. They do have a larger budget. They have different resources they can use to campaign. And secondly, they also provide a network to reach out to other delegations or program areas, which some candidates don't have. Or connections with other delegations or groups. It's hard to reach out and schedule things, make appointments. But that's all about campaigning. And the party system allows you to do that, as it has people from different delegations all over the state with different ideas and approaches to things. They offer new things and revitalization to people's campaigns, and they give them new opportunities that they wouldn't have before to campaign and reach out more than they could have.
So this one goes to Nico. Many prior youth governors and youth governor candidates have spoken about creating an interdelegation mingling, as you have. However, most have failed to do so. How do you believe you will be different?
Well, I know that from the past, many youth governors have tried, and sadly they have failed, but I hope to put this at the forefront of my administration. This will be the #1 issue that I hope to tackle from the minute I'm sworn into office. And the way I want to do this is through, one, of course, creating mixers at different conferences so delegations can get together and make those friendships and exchange the ideas that are so crucial to this program. But above all, I want to create something called like a YNG Facebook of sorts, where it's much easier to connect with delegations, connect with delegates, using the internet, using social media to make it much easier. Because in the past, I think prior youth governors have been disabled because of the lack of technology, lack of media, and now we live in a very exciting time in terms of that, so I want to use that to make sure we are connected to create this sister delegation program I'm so passionate about.
I would like to add on to that. A huge part of my platform as well is talking about that inter-delegation communication and cooperation. And I also agree that it starts with doing things like mixers, setting aside times for things like that. But what I would also do as part of my platform is try and find leaders within delegations, but not only just leaders, but leaders that are already at that point, already in that mindset where all they want to do is form new relationships, break outside of these boundaries that people see in youth and government. So, you know, as hard as I try, I can't do it by myself as youth governor. A youth governor can't do it by themselves, but if they have a team of people doing it with them with a shared goal, a unified goal for a unified youth in government, I think that that's how we can begin to achieve that process.
The next question goes back to you, Chris. Your speech touched on low voter turnout. What do you think is keeping our generation from voting?
So, I mean, there's a number of factors that could be possibly keeping the voter turnout very low, whether it goes from dissatisfaction with government legislation to an apathetic generation. But rather than talking about why it's happening, I would like to talk about how we could fix it. And for me, I really think that it begins with us. As I said in my speech, it requires more than just engagement. It requires leadership. I mean, 3,000 youth in government is encompassing 3,000 of the most engaged, amazing people in our generation. But as engaged as they are, it requires more than that. It requires leadership. I don't want people to think that just because you're a teenager, just because you can't vote, doesn't mean that you can't make change, because you can. You can do it at a local level. You can do it at a state level. And it is possible. And that is how we begin to do it. We have to show our leaders that we are ready to take on change, that we are ready to take on responsibility, and that's where it begins. It begins with civic engagement, and hopefully it is through there that we will create a more engaged, vocal, leading generation that is willing to vote.
Go ahead.
Well, I would attribute low voter turnout rates to three things. Firstly, in our education system, we're not giving political activism enough credit. We're oversimplifying the political environment, and gerrymandering and other illegal practices deter people from participating in the political environment around them. Right now, we're simplified to Democratic and Republican. We can see that on Capitol Hill. There's two parties. We believe there can only be two ways of thought, and that's not right. There's so many more ways to think, so many more ways to approach things, but we're forcing this generation to meet two norms, and it's not fair to them. And when it comes to our education system, we're not giving them the necessary ideas or resources so that they know how they can be active. And then lastly, illegal practices such as gerrymandering, altering voting lines, cuts down the power of actual votes. And people aren't happy with the political environment, and it needs to change.
I'm going to have to cut you off. Thank you. Thank you to all the candidates for attending, and good luck this weekend in Sacramento.